McEwans Champion award-winning premium beer.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. First thing, I've trimmed the beard up. It was getting out of hand. I looked like fucking Grizzly Adams. And the side bits had to go. They were getting way too out of control. So, go me. I have got one here today, and it was recommended by somebody on the channel. A subscriber said, can you review it? They've drunk it quite a few times and they quite like it. And this is the McEwans Champion award-winning premium beer. Now, I've seen this quite a few times in Marston's, and it's relatively cheap. It's under £2. I think it's about £1.80 something. But what's put me off, and I'll sort of get onto this in the history, this is a Marston's beer. Now, you know my views on Marston's beer. Yeah, they might have very good intentions about taking over breweries and stuff like that and reviving old brands, but they have a big habit of changing recipes and generally ruining beer. Now, there's, I would say, three main reasons why you would change the recipe. One, if you were reviving a brand and you didn't have the original recipe or the original brew sheet, but you were trying to get as close as you could to the original flavour, then you may inadvertently change the recipe by not having the original recipe sheet. Two is cost. You use cheaper ingredients. If you buy in bulk, then you're basically distributing the same ingredients to your brands. And number three is a lack of local authentic ingredients. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, let's take Guinness export. In certain regions, they use different sugars. So, for example, in Africa, they would probably use some millet in there and also some different types of sugar, such as beet sugar, etc., whatever the local widely available sugar was. In India or the Far East, they would use jaggery sugar, which is, again, a fermentable sugar. So that's why it would vary. In Belgium, of course, they do a Guinness there, a Belgian Guinness, and that would, I would imagine, be beet sugar or candy sugar. So there you go. They're the three main reasons I personally think you change recipes. What do you... and I'm 100% sure, well, I'm not. I'm 99.9% sure that the recipe for this has changed since Marston's took it over. And I'm guessing it's going to be reason two, cost. Now, they've just been taken over by Carlsberg, as you all know, but they're the very latest chapter in the history of McEwans. McEwans sadly doesn't exist anymore. It had originally been going since 1856, and it started by a Scottish fella named McEwan, obviously, but he did some industrial espionage. He went round Allsop's Brewery and some of the Burton breweries, checked out their techniques and opened up a brewery in Edinburgh. And they were very, very successful. And they went from strength to strength, merging and buying up breweries in Scotland. And unfortunately for them, during the Second World War and afterwards, sales declined and they had to, I wouldn't say reinvent themselves, but they took on a lot of mergers and they eventually merged with Scottish and Newcastle brewers. Now, Scottish and Newcastle were taken over by the Heineken Corporation, who eventually sold it to Wells and Young. Remember them? They've gone now as well. They used to be, I think they were based in Bedford. And of course, Wells and Young were taken over by Marston's. And that's where we are now. Now, that's a very, very potted history of McEwans. They've got quite an in-depth and interesting history. They were one of the original India Pale Ale exporters. They came from a large shipping family, and they used that to their advantage, and they shipped Pale Ale to India. And you may or may not know, but the other big brewer in Scotland was, the other big beer, I should say, was William Younger's Tart and Bitter. I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was his brother, basically, and they brewed that, they brewed this, and when they got taken over by Scottish and Newcastle, the Newcastle Brown, they were the three core beers that they produced, and they had quite a large share of the market in Scotland and in Tyneside as well. But it's a gradual decline for this brewery, and sadly I think it was in 2005 that they were sold to Wells and Young, and this beer was originally brewed for competition in 1997, and it was the International Beer Awards, I think that's what it was, and hence the name Champion. And if you look on the label, yeah, it's a gold medal winner for the International Beer Awards. Now, I don't know about you, but this is another reason I think the recipe has changed. In fact, I'm almost certain it's changed. I doubt very much in any competition worth its salt that a Marston's beer would win a gold medal. But there you go, that's just my opinion. But as I say, this was originally brewed for a competition, and it became so popular that they started producing this beer. And they, as I say, McEwans were quite a big brewer, and they used to sponsor a lot of football clubs. Obviously, being in Newcastle or around that area, merging with Scottish and Newcastle, they sponsored Newcastle United on away games, not the home games. I think the home shirt was sponsored by Newcastle Brown or had the Newcastle Brown branding on it. But in Scotland, now don't shoot me down for this, I couldn't give a monkeys about Scottish football, but Glasgow Rangers were sponsored by this lot in the 90s, and I think possibly up until the early 2000s as well. I do remember working on building sites in West London, and I did work with a lot of jocks, and quite a few of them were Rangers fans, and they'd come in and they'd have Rangers tops on with I do remember the McEwans Lager logo emblazoned on the front. And I also remember the Glasgow Rangers team for when Graham Souness was manager in the early 90s, and they had half the England team in their squad, and it was a really impressive side, and they were just winning everything back then. Rangers, you could bet your house on them. Celtic were absolutely no, they were pretty dire back then. But Scottish football, to me, no disrespect, but I really don't get on with it, to be honest. I'm not a fan of it. I certainly don't get the sectarian politics in it and all that. So, yeah, not for me, thanks. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get on to this beer. This is 7.3%. It's a 500ml bottle. It is, now they've said a premium beer. When this was brewed originally, this was what's known as a wee heavy. And a wee heavy was like a very strong beer that was popular in Scotland. And sometimes you'd mix that with other beers as well. For example, pale ales or light ales usually. And I can't remember that there was a drink. You had heavy and you had wee heavy, and there was other types, but some of them were blends where you'd mix two beers together. But that's what this originally was. They do a stronger one than this, which is a Scotch ale, and Scotch ales are very strong. This is 7.3%, which is quite hefty. It's sort of in the it's not an old ale or a barley wine. It has its own category, and that category is wee heavy. Just a quick one. I want to show you this. I'm not sure whether you can see it or not, but this is a sort of throwback. If you can remember the old McEwans lager, it used to have a picture of a Cavalier on the front, and that was taken from the famous painting, The Laughing Cavalier. They used that on there, and I think, going slightly off topic, but the Younger's Tart and Bitter, it had some old boy with a top hat and a cane, and it had some tartan behind it. I do remember them being absolutely fucking terrible beers. I remember the McEwans was not nice at all. They did McEwans lager, but they also did like it in the red can. I don't know what that was, but it was not good. I remember it as being not good beer. Anyway, that's that. let's get it open. Let's see what's going on. Now, I know there's a few reviews of this on YouTube. I've deliberately not looked at them because I don't want to be influenced by what people think about this beer. I've not tried it before. And just to reiterate what I was saying about the Laughing Cavalier, there it is on the cap. That is a throwback. That's nothing to do with Marston's. But Marston's do that quite a lot. They buy up these old brands. Same with Green King. And they... Well, to be honest, I don't know why they do it. Because I think if you're going to revive a brand, I think you should stick to the original recipe. Now, I'm not having for 1 minute that they haven't got the original brew sheet. Because when you take over a brewery, 99 times out of 100, you will get their recipe books as well. So there you go. Anyway, let's get the nose on this. And what do you expect from a Marston's beer? There's hardly any aroma. So again, it has got the Marston's signature no aroma. There was a little bit left. There's a little bit there coming through there now. It's grainy. It's quite fruity, I will say that. There's quite a lot of dark fruit on there. And there's a touch of ethanol that I am getting, which is sort of understandable at 7.3%. I'm just looking at this glass, it's filthy. What the fuck has happened there? And that's inside the glass. That is residue from the dishwasher. That is disgusting. Yeah, there's like a sort of a dark fruit, sweet dark fruit, caramel stroke, toffee malt, vague aroma. I mean, these are not big aromas at all. This is my first beer of the day as well. I'll tell you what though, I will say, it does look like a reasonable pint in the glass, which again is unusual for Marston's. And it is a lovely colour. That is like a ruby, a dark ruby colour. You can't really see that, but oh, can you? If I hold that up to the light, yeah, you may be able to see that. It's like a dark ruby. 7.3% though, so you've got to be a bit wary of this. And I'm wary of this, not because of that, but because it's made and brewed by Marston's. I was looking up today, Marston's have got an office in Italy. Fuck's sake. If we export beer to Italy and they think this is the best we can do, Jesus. Or the best Marston's. Marston's are the best we can do. Fucking hell. God help us. Anyway, let's get this down the hatch. Bottoms up. Oh, fucking hell. Wow. There's definite flavour there, which is unusual for Marston's. But it's syrupy. It's like there's a glucose or some kind of syrup, sweet syrup in that. There's toffee malt in there, big dark fruit, touch of ethanol, not much but there is some. Hot bitterness on the finish, but dominated by some kind of syrup. It's got that cloying type of taste to it that it's a little bit sickly. I'm wondering why they put this in a 500ml bottle. This probably would have been better in a 330ml, but you know, that's a pint, so well, it's 500ml, so it's just under a pint, but the ABV is the same as Special Brew, and in fact it's reminding me of one of them super lagers, but it's not, it's obviously an ale. There is elements of dark fruit in that, but it's just got an artificial air to it, if you know what I mean. And I'm struggling. It's probably one of the most flavoursome beers that Marston produce. The trouble is, the flavours ain't nice. Usually Marston's beer is just, it's like the aromas are just fucking bland. This isn't bland. This has got quite a bit of flavour, but they've just gone overboard on that syrup. It's reminded me of a really bad Belgian double. The sort of thing that, or a Brune even. It's the sort of thing that what's that brewery? Alcon Mars. It's the sort of thing they do. And of course they're the equivalent of Marston's. And oh, this is a real shame, because that looks like a decent pint, doesn't it? I mean, the head retention on that is good, considering it's 7.5%. There's hints of a nice flavour in that, but I just can't get past that. They've just gone overboard on the syrup, and I'd imagine that they've done that to try and curb the ethanol, and they shouldn't. They should have just let that. Well, I suppose some people may not have liked that, but oh, this isn't good. And I think there's some tannin in there as well. I thought it was hop bitterness, but it's not. I think that's tannin, and that again, that is another signature ingredient, especially for the cheaper contracted brews that Marston's do. They throw loads of tannin in there and try and, well, I'm sort of assuming that they do that to try and make out it's got some hops in there. But no, I'm not a fan of this, to be honest. I'm struggling, and I didn't taste this, the original one, and when it well, that would have been fucking years ago. That would have been over 20 years ago when this was being brewed, still up in Scotland. This is now brewed in Bedford, and yeah, you can imagine what kinds of satanic rituals go on in that place. I mean, they do some absolutely fucking terrible beers in that place. I think it's the old Wells and Young brewery up there. No, I can't drink it. There's nothing Moorish about it. It tastes artificial. That tannin is starting to wind me up, but that syrup is just dominant in there. There is a little bit of ethanol, but I don't really like it, to be honest. What does it say on the side? Brewed specifically for a competition entry. Yeah, that then going on to take first place. I bet it didn't taste like that, or the competition was absolute dog shit. Champion was the obvious name for this outstanding premium beer, with a rich, strong flavour and unique, sweet and true fruity character. Champion is a firm favourite in the McEwans range. Well, it doesn't fucking exist anymore, does it? It's all Marston's. They advertise this on the Witchwood site. They do that. All the other breweries they've taken over, Ridgeback, Witchwood, some of the others that Marston's have taken over, they advertise their beers. So you'd see Witchwood beers on the Ridgeback site, etc. Nah, I don't like this. Nah, it's not for me. So, what is the verdict on McEwan's Champion? Well, when it won a gold award, my theory is either the competition was really shit or this didn't taste like that when it was in the competition, because it's just got Marston's written all over it. There's corners cut, there's far too much syrup in there, and it just doesn't taste moorish. The tannin in there, I'm getting that on the finish. Nah, it's just if you can imagine a Marston's beer with a little touch of flavour, more flavour than usual, but not good, if you know what I mean. They've just bunged a load of syrup into this and it just dominates. There's like a sickly, cloying sweetness to it, and it ain't good. Now, don't get me wrong, you can use glucose syrup to quite good effect. You only have to look at some of the Belgian brewers who do that. And I don't know, this has it got? No, it hasn't got the Marston's head brewer. Marston's head brewer is, I think it's Paddy. His name's Paddy McGinty, or it was at some point. Good old English name there, as Al Murray would say. But I don't know. I think his mission is to just make every beer taste not good, and he's doing a very fucking good job of it. And this is another example of it. So I'm going to give it a low mark. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. And I don't know. You might like it if you don't like beer, but the warmer that gets, the more sickly sweet it gets, and not in a good way. Nah, I don't like that. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I'm not recommending it. And if you see this on the shelf, give it a swerve. And remember, I'm drinking this shit, so you don't have to.